Hi, guys. Welcome to episode number 4 of the Neurointuitive Network. I wanted to respond to a comment I received on the last episode, but also to something I encountered in the wild, as I would say. So, today we're going to talk about being in a free state, and we're going to talk about fawning. So, those are terms that people use to describe particular trauma responses. Um, a free state can look like total uh what I call a free state is stop the show. Stop the show. You literally hold yourself in place. You can't be moved. uh I was reading something actually by Alice Sparkly Cat, who's an astrologer. I think that's how you say their name. uh they were writing about the rodent in Chinese astrology, and how rodent is also called rat. It's a bad translation, but the rodent in Chinese astrology, and they were talking about how the rodent is extremely good. It just, when they're in the sight of prey, they stop the show. But it's just a feigned stopping of the show. That's how, like, it's the actual way the evolutionary response is supposed to work. You may freeze, but then you respond with your flight, right? A rodent is most likely not going to fight back. They can, but it's that kind of moment of complete stillness where the rodent knows if they're in close quarters, they can freeze and their predator will most likely get bored. And because they're so quick, they can move to safety once the predator takes their attention off of them. So that's essentially how a freeze state is supposed to work. It's supposed to be temporary until the predator loses interest. Um, but some people can stay in one for a very long time. And that doesn't mean all of them stays. It means it can mean parts of them stay. So the comment that I was talking about, the subscriber was asking about essentially processing emotion, processing some sort of time. And when they do, they feel this instant block in their body. Okay, well, the block is there to protect you, but you have to ask the block if it's misguided. Trauma does this thing to your perception, does this thing to your actual brain, where your timelines essentially get mixed up. So you will believe that you are in a situation that you're very much not in anymore. Or you will believe that you are stuck when you are very much not stuck. And it gets confusing because your brain is essentially um, lying to you. It really requires you to zoom out. I'm thinking about, again, this rodent example. Like, if you're thinking of a mouse, they're not usually solo creatures. Uh, so if you were to zoom out, I'm sure the predator could find some other prey if it was necessary. But at that moment, the totality of your reality is that the predator is standing in front of you, waiting to consume you. And um, that's it. That's it. And situations that are life and death that way are meant to narrow your focus because all of your energy is supposed to be derived to respond. It's supposed to be dedicated to responding to it. But once you're not there anymore, you need to be able to recognize that you're not there. So I'll post a video specifically on this about like how to get out of a freeze state, but it's really important for you to get grounded when you notice that you're feeling those emotions. So that block, really get grounded, as in know where you are in the room, use all your five senses to ground you into the room. Know where you are, take a sip of water, taste it, really taste it, Um, take a breath and ask yourself if you are still in that situation. And if you are, that means a response is required. Because sometimes people can stay in situations that have traumatized them because they've gotten locked into a pattern of abuse. They've normalized it, and they're again the focus is narrowed, so they don't know that there's more out there. Sometimes the situation is literally so dangerous that they don't feel that they can move. Again, it requires a response. You have to value yourself that highly that you know that when you are under threat, you respond. The beauty of a free state is that it buys you time to respond. You've already reacted, but it buys you time to respond. So when you are encountering something that you have decided to numb, you can thank yourself for buying time, but know that you are now cheating yourself out of time and you don't have to do that any longer. You can respond. You can respond. So basically, what the commenter was talking about was she was trying to quote unquote tell herself the truth. She was encountering a memory and everything in her body told her to stop. Well, yes, everything in your body will tell you to stop if your body still believes you're in a life or death situation. It's the timelines mixing up. This is why the getting grounded in your present moment is very important. And then asking that free state, is it actually contributing to your well-being? Is it contributing to your well-being in a way that is long-term? Is it still helpful? Is it still needed? Accept it, acknowledge it for what it is, and then really tell yourself um, the truth. Ask yourself the questions. I think sometimes people think of trauma can be an imposition. It's an imposition. Um, we don't want to have those experiences. Obviously not. But once we do, we can't pretend that we didn't. Trauma is an imposition. Um, but it's also not irrevocable. You will never have not had the experience, but you can mitigate or even eliminate some of the effects that it has on you. We do have that power. I've experienced significant trauma in my life, um, from domestic violence to rape to parents. And for a long time, I very much kept myself as shut down as possible. I was fawning. That's something else we'll talk about, which is like the kind of people pleasing, trying to manage the environment thing that we do, which is obviously a very natural response to feeling like prey. You try to manage your environment. You see how it makes sense evolutionarily. Um, but yeah, I've experienced significant trauma in my life. And I got to a point where I realized I could stay here and my life would continue to be a particular way that I wasn't really interested in living, or I could do something differently. And one of the first steps was really seeing, okay, trauma is an imposition, but it's not irrevocable, and I don't have to continuously extend the invite. Like, what was the intended effect of doing someone harm? There's a power dynamic at play where it says that my wants, my needs are placed above your well being. I'm going to take from you or attempt to take from you to meet my wants and my needs Because people who resort to traumatizing others are usually people who have been traumatized. They're always people who feel powerless. I'm talking about malicious stuff. I'm not talking about people being messy and you getting caught up in the crossfire. I'm talking about actually malicious stuff. Even though we can talk about the crossfire, because that is a more casual transmission of trauma. But there is this very skewed power dynamic at play. And at some point, you can take yours back out of the equation. Again, you are not here to rewrite the past. You are here to be able to live into the now in a way that is pleasing to you, in a way that is healthy for you. It's not going to be healthy to be living 7 years ago in your present moment. That's never going to be healthy. Even if 7 years ago was a really great time for you, there's a now that you need to pay attention to. So there's an importance of centering your own experience, not to a point where it becomes a reason for you not to live, but where it becomes inspiration for you. So when you are feeling that protective mechanism come up in your body, when you try to address certain experiences that you've had, just be grateful that it was there in the first place because it contributed to your survival. And just acknowledge what it is that you really want to do. Because there are people who make the choice day after day to live there. It's not always a conscious choice. But there are people who choose day after day to live there. Now, personally, I wouldn't describe myself as spiteful, but I'm very fair. I realized in some of the ways that trauma was imposed on me, that simply was not fair to me. And for me to carry it forward would not be fair to myself. It simply was not fair to me. I didn't have to go wield a sword and punish them. Trust me, they were punished. They're probably still being punished, to be honest. But that's not my focus or my job. The way I did myself justice was by choosing how I was going to live. Did I want something that happened when I was, let's say, 17? Did I want something that happened at 17 to be the rest of my life? No. No. And once I made that decision, I was determined to bring myself to whatever point I needed to get to, so where that no could be affirmed in reality. No. Because I value myself very highly, and I value the life experience that I am intended to have. I do not believe that we came here to suffer. There's this strange sort of poetic focus on agony that gets inculcated into us as the real living. The full spectrum of emotions is the real living. Knowing the contours of your emotional body is the real living. You're not immune from suffering, but you're also not immune from joy. And the way that I was living when I was essentially, I'll call it a trauma forward person, um, wasn't joyful. I felt so exhausted and broken because I was fighting all of these subconscious battles. And, my value had been called into question, or I thought it had been through those experiences, because why would anybody do that to another human being? I certainly wouldn't. There must be something wrong with me. Not the case. It's not fair to yourself to have those kind of background dialogues running along. It's not fair. It's not right. It's not just. So that should be enough. That should be enough to take you out of that freeze and into your response now. If you're looking around at your life experience and you are not pleased with it, and you have this awareness that you are not pleased with it, that is you telling you that you are meant to be living something different. And when I say that, the shift might come in how you relate to your external reality. Because I know a lot of very privileged people, theoretically privileged, materially privileged, who despise their external reality. And relatively objectively speaking, well, relatively objectively would be subjective. Anyway, from looking on the outside, materially, quote unquote, it couldn't get better. So the shift that would need to come is not necessarily in the external, it's how they relate to it. And any internal shift produces an external result. Any internal shift produces an external result. So when you are displeased with what you are seeing of your life, know that you are the person who gets to change that. You are your own God. You've always been your own God. You can also choose to be your own demon if that is what you believe in. If that's the kind of thing that you believe in. I notice invariably the term devil is used as a catch-all for competing drives or for the unhealthily egotistical side of human nature. That's when a lot of people bring in the devil. Like I said, you are your own God. You can be your own demon. You can be your own devil. The relationship is yours to manage. The relationship is yours to create. You are constantly co-creating with your environment. You're constantly co-creating with the universe. So if you, again, are looking around and you are not pleased with what's going on, you are the only one who gets to stop the show. You're the only one who gets to write a new script. You can make edits. Like, you can make edits. If you have been in that free state for a long time, movement is going to feel a little bit foreign to you. It will naturally likely bring up some anxiety. Anxiety is healthy because, again, it's meant to be that intuitive backup. Anxiety is there for when you're in a new situation and you need to scan the landscape. You don't really know. Your body is supposed to come online in a way that allows you to respond readily. That's anxiety. It's a protective thing. When the response gets out of check, when it gets out of control, you're hypervigilant. You think everything is a danger. This is what happens again when your timelines are confused. Everything is a danger because you're still in that situation where you felt that was the case. It's important to validate that feeling of danger. And then it's also important to acknowledge your safety in the present moment. And again, if you are not in a situation that is safe for you, that is something that you need to respond to. You need to change that. Do it in whatever way is intuitively correct for you. Do it in the quote unquote smart way, as long as the smart way is intuitively correct for you. Sometimes in situations of abuse and trauma, you'll hear, oh, she did everything right. He did everything right. Being right is not what we're concerned about. We are concerned about getting back into our bodies. We're concerned about listening to our intuitive voice. And the prerequisite for that is getting back into your body. We are concerned about seeing your body as a safe place, not a place of trauma or violation. We are concerned with your relationship with self-trust. We are concerned with making ourselves available for the truth. It's an important stance from which to ask your questions. If whatever answer that comes out is simply the truth, and the truth has no interest in making you wrong or bad or stupid or less than, if the response that I get simply gets to be the truth from my intuitive voice, from my God voice, whatever you would like to call it, if it simply gets to be the truth, what would that prompt me to do? Where would that prompt me to shift? What am I being called to do? Some people are afraid of getting more intuitive because they think what it means is that it will be holding up the mirror and showing every single fault that they have. Realistically, when you're holding up the mirror, you see more of the whole. It's not about showing up your faults. That's a perception thing. You can choose to perceive beauty. You can choose to just perceive this is the whole thing. It's not interested in making you wrong. In fact, I'd argue that your intuition is interested in making you correct. Not you, your ego, but making your life go correctly for you. Making things right where something is off. That is your intuitive urge. You want to see the beauty in things. You want for things to reflect the wholeness that is already present. That is intuitively what you believe in on your deepest level. Moving on to the fawn response, that's often where we get fawning. People who are more acutely aware of this sort of sense of wholeness. They want to make everything nice. They want to make everything right for people. They want their environment to be quote unquote perfect. For their safety, they go into these patterns of people pleasing or not being the leader in their own life, just kind of going with the flow and beyond what's necessary. So rather than feel silly or weak or stupid for having employed that response, for having employed that response, or for being historically prone to that sort of thing, you can look at it as a reflection of your capacity to see wholeness. And instead of weaponizing that same capacity against yourself, now you can use it for yourself. Please, you. Make sure environments are right for you. You have no control over what anybody else does. But please, you show up for you. When you scan the environment, see the opportunities that are there for you. Don't try to move people around like set pieces. They are not dolls. Look at why you have that urge. And again, instead of demonizing it, say, I have an amazing capacity to see wholeness. I have an amazing ability to see the best in people, places, things, situations. I have an amazing capacity. And rather than weaponize it against yourself, start serving you. Have a healthy self-interest. Have a healthy recognition of your value. I meet people all the time. They feel like they're constantly in situations where they're being undervalued. And they give me all sorts of reasons. Sometimes they're comforted by attributing it to, a system. And systems absolutely exist. Systems of oppression absolutely exist. It should not be at the center. It should not be at the center. Because over adherence to a system of oppression teaches you where to pitch your dreams. It teaches you where to pitch your dreams. And that's often inaccurate because these systems come from people who don't value you. These artifacts, these systems are artifacts of an intentional effort to devalue you. So when you overemphasize its role, and it's playing a role because that is the environment, that is the context in which we live. But when you overemphasize its role, when you invite it in, when you make it, when you give it a plate, something happens to your subconscious that inevitably needs remedying. Because the most important thing will always be the way that you see yourself, will always be the way that you value yourself. We always have stories of quote unquote outliers. But each one of us is an outlier in some way. Each one of us is an outlier in some way. There is something that you do better than anyone else that you know. There is some talent, some gift that you have that puts you on a different scale than someone else. And that's not what you should focus on, but it's why you're here. There's always something that you do a little bit differently than anyone else. So we all have that capacity. Again, I was going to tell you not to be delusional, but you actually do need a little bit of delusion. Um, and the funny thing happens is that the delusion starts to become reality. Make sure it's a positive one. Because if you're deluded about your own value in a negative way, you will consistently see that reflected back. You will consistently see that reflected back. I meet people all of the time, once again, who think, they look around their lives and they're not pleased. And they're like, why does this always happen to me? Why do people treat me in this way? It's not your quote unquote fault, but you have to shore up your perception of yourself to make sure that your value is appropriately expressed, articulated. Once you've acknowledged your own divinity and you've resolved to continuously acknowledge it, no one can take that away from you. No one. When you first start, people may try to box you back in, put you back in your place, make sure that you continue in the old delusion that you had about your value. But you have to be stronger than that. You have to be more determined than that. You have to be more present than that. You have to recognize when someone's projecting their perception of your value, their perception of their own value onto you. I just heard this. I guess we're talking about race now. I can't remember who said it, um, but it was this is American race history. Somebody said I think it was the Negro has no rights which a white man is bound to respect. I don't even remember what that quote is from. I know my audience is multiracial, but let's talk about it. Um, that is really how some people walk through the world feeling about Black people. When we think of the numbers on that, like how many Black people there are in the world, don't you think that's a delusion? So, if that is the delusion at the heart of these systems of oppression, please do not let that dwell in your psyche unexamined, unchecked. You know your value is higher than that. You know that. Don't give that delusion any respect. Okay, y'all. I just used my strategy, my authority, and my motivation. I just asked internally, is there anything more that I need to say? The answer was no. So we're going to leave it there. I certainly did not expect this to take the direction it's taken, but I'm glad it did. As always, let me know if you have any questions. I'd love to know your responses to this, if anything shifted for you. Even if it didn't, let me know. I love to respond. I'm a generator. And I'm very choosy about what I respond to. Anyway, because I value myself very highly. Okay, guys, I'll see you next time. And be well in the interim.